ESTP safe loop, what it means and how to break free. For the extroverted personality types, going into their loop means they turn to their extrovert functions. This isn't immediately a bad or negative thing, and sometimes it occurs under stress as a means of helping the person navigate whatever challenges they are facing. At first, it can cause them to turn towards parts of themselves they normally would not, applying pressure to a function that isn't as natural or strong for them. It can help the individual figure out some things they are struggling with, but if this goes on for too long, it can certainly become unhealthy for them. When they get in this loop for long periods of time, they definitely need a means of breaking free before it applies too much stress to their weaker functions and leaves them feeling emotionally and mentally exhausted. The ESTP loop causes them to turn to these two functions and neglect their introverted functions entirely. The ESTP becomes focused on their dominant extrovert sensing and tertiary extrovert feeling functions. Ordinarily, the ESTP would also utilize their auxiliary introverted thinking function, but their loop causes them to neglect this function entirely. During this time, the ESTP becomes very focused on seeking outside attention and validation from others. While ESTPs enjoy being in the spotlight, this becomes exacerbated in much more unhealthy ways. They become so focused on being the center of attention and putting themselves out there for others to see, that they can lose sight of things that would normally be important and valuable to them. ESTP typically rely on introverted thinking. When the ESTP is not in their safe loop, they rely heavily on their dominant extrovert sensing but also on their auxiliary introverted thinking function. Their introverted thinking function allows them to assess things logically, looking at facts and analyzing this information from a rational mindset. Instead of allowing emotions to control their decisions and beliefs, the ESTP can take a step back and see things from a more logical angle. They enjoy information and want to be precise and accurate in the things they uncover. The ESTP uses this T as a means of helping them to understand the world, and also understand the best response to the people around them. Instead of letting themselves become caught up in their connection to others and analyzing what other people might think or feel, they logically realize that their inner minds are important and should be valued. The ESTP doesn't constantly turn to others for validation, since their sense of rational thinking helps them get this validation. The safe loop in ESTPs. When the ESTP turns only to their extrovert functions, they neglect their introverted ones entirely. Neglecting those functions is what causes them to go into their face loop. This is something which does often occur during times of extreme stress or serious change for the ESTP. It can also happen when the ESTP feels like their normal way of responding to the world isn't working correctly. Instead of relying on what comes naturally, the ESTP will turn to only their extrovert functions in hopes of shaking things up and finding some sort of positive outcome. Of course, if this happens for too long, it can cause more stress for the ESTP, as they aren't meant to be in this loop for longer periods. When the ESTP relies on their say and fey functions, they focus on pleasing and impressing others. They turn to other people for a sense of validation, constantly trying to understand and read the behaviors of those around them. The ESTP can become reckless, constantly focusing on the present moment and ways to get the attention of those around them. They can become the life of the party, but in a way that can start to appear rather constant. Instead of just enjoying themselves in the moment, the ESTP becomes obsessed with impressing others and making themselves seem like the star of the room. This comes from a desire to impress everyone and gain a sense of validation from their affection. The ESTP simply wants to please other people and finds ways to make them happy, but they also care deeply about how those people view them. Ordinarily, ESTPs do care about making their loved ones happy and about gaining attention from others, but not quite to this extent. They would normally utilize their introverted thinking function to pull back on this, and it helps the ESTP to value their own mind more than the emotional validation of others. How to escape the ESTP loop? The best way for the ESTP to escape their loop is to focus on the functions they neglect. Instead of being so focused on going out and experiencing excitement, the ESTP can actually benefit from reading a book or solving some sort of puzzle or problem. Looking inward and trying to draw out their introverted functions is exactly what the ESTP needs to become themselves once again. They don't need to turn to others for validation, but they might benefit from being around introverts in these situations. The ESTP really needs to feel comfortable spending time inside of their own minds, which is why focusing on these types of introverted behaviors can be beneficial for them. ESTPs love researching and reading, and this definitely pushes them to focus on their introverted functions and can really draw out their introverted thinking, which they have been neglecting in their loop. The more time they spend inside of their own thoughts, the ESTP will start to feel themselves connecting with their normal traits and patterns once again. Taking time away from other people and large social gatherings is definitely something the ESTP needs to do in order to break free from their safe loop.